Welcome to the swing, everybody. It's nice to see you again. Made some coffee. And today we are going to talk about Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. Where do I begin with a book like this? I'll start by talking about Kurt himself, the author, because I think, unlike most science fiction, 99% of it, you don't have real world events that the author experienced tied to a science fiction novel. So I think this book deserves a lot of context to really showcase exactly what he was writing about. Vonnegut was he was a soldier in World War II and was a prisoner of war when the firebombing of Dresden happened, which I was not super educated about before reading this book. And it was really eye-opening to see how impactful this was in terms of World War II events and just how awful and tragic it was. I think Vonnegut, not only did he write this as a anti-war novel, but I think he did something special here that most people can't do, which is just to open a portal into a place that I could never experience the horrific tragedies of World War II, but Vonnegut clearly wanted to bare his soul a little bit to showcase what had happened. But he didn't. I don't think he wanted to do it in a way that most other people did it. I also don't think he felt that was most impactful, because if he would have written just a nonfiction, here was my experience as a soldier, American soldier, prisoner of war during the firebombing of Dresden, I don't think that would have resonated with people like this book would have. And that's not to discount the experience or those kinds of stories, those kinds of books. But as most of you who have read this book know, Vonnegut he's a special writer and somebody who I admire greatly. He passed away, I believe, in 2007, in his 80s, I think. And I've gone back these past few days since reading this, and I've gone and watched some interviews with him, read up about him, and I can't hardly describe how much of a connection I feel like I had with his writing, where he just, like most people who read him, he has a charm and a humanity about him that so many other authors just, for whatever reason, fail to achieve. And I think he was a special person and special writer, and I'm super glad that I picked this up. This is going to be one of the most hopefully special reviews that I do, because this book it was just really powerful. And I don't mean to make this all dramatic and build it up, but I think for the kind of reader that I am and the stuff that I really chase after and want to read about, Vonnegut just strikes that perfect balance between dark humor and intellectual depth, but also just his prose sometimes are just so. It's like you're talking to a friend by the fire. You're talking to an older gentleman by the fire who's telling you a story, and he just paints it with these vivid colors and these jokes. And he could be telling you about the most horrific event, but he brings a levity to it that is, it's just you have those special moments with people sometimes where they tell you stories about their life, and you're locked in, because it's just it's more of an experience than it is a reading of a book, if you will. And so that's a little bit of backstory, I guess, on the book and on the author. Uh, the plot centers around a character named Billy Pilgrim, who is a soldier in World War II. And I think Vonnegut sort of tells this story. He inserts himself into the narrative as the narrator, as the writer. So kind of breaking that fourth wall. And we follow Billy Pilgrim, and several times throughout the novel, Vonnegut humorously again inserts himself where he'll say Billy did this, and there was a soldier nearby that did that. That was me being Kurt Vonnegut. So there, I like it. Just makes me smile just to think about the way he wrote himself into the book to try and. I think a lot of what Billy went through is what Kurt went through. But I think Kurt wanted to give himself a little bit of distance from it so that he could also tell a science fiction story. And so Billy Pilgrim is just this kind of scrawny, skinny, tall soldier who just, like a lot of people in World War II who weren't really signing up to fight, uh, he was not a good soldier by many people's definitions. So he just kind of sort of finds himself in these situations. He doesn't seek out fighting. He doesn't seek out. Uh, I don't know. He just kind of finds himself in this situation, and he it's told in a non-linear way, so it's hard to like. Here's step one, chapter two, chapter three, and so on. And so it's going to be just bear with me as I try to explain how this book goes. Jumps around between different points in time during Billy's life where most of the book, the meat of the book is during his experience in World War II. But um, he was also abducted by aliens who Kurt created as Tralfamadorians. That's the name of the aliens on planet Tralfamador. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Little, like 2 foot tall aliens who can't speak but can use telepathy, and they. This is like a very amicable abduction where Billy just kind of is like, I knew I was supposed to go with them, so I went, and I found myself on this planet, and they observed him as like a human in a zoo, like a human pet in their zoo, but they didn't mistreat him. He was just kind of hanging out, and uh, very bizarre, but also helps kind of narrate this plot, move along this plot of Billy jumping around in time, where he's, I think, kind of like Kurt inserting himself into the story as Billy Pilgrim, so to speak. I think this was another way for Vonnegut to be a little bit distanced from what the events that take place, because let's face it, like it's a science fiction tale in some senses, but in the other senses, it's legitimately a Sam. Do not bark. Trying to do a video, bud. Every time he runs to the fence, there's usually somebody that's going to walk by, and he just starts howling. Um, it's a science fiction tale on one hand, but on the other hand, it's a very gruesome and brutal retelling of, like I said, just one of the most tragic events in human history. And there's a passage that I kind of bookmarked that I want to just read a little bit from that I think really illustrates how this moment brought me to tears, and just it was so. I think it sums up a lot of what Vonnegut was trying to get across in this novel. Um, so Billy is this is chapter 4 in the book, just shortly into chapter 4, and it's right before he gets abducted. Um, so it says he came slightly unstuck in time, saw the late movie backwards, then forwards again. It was a movie about American bombers in the Second World War and the gallant men who flew them. Seen backwards by Billy, the story went like this. So Billy is watching war take place in reverse. And I had never thought about that like this. So here we go. American planes full of holes and wounded men and corpses took off backwards from an airfield in England. Over France, a few German fighter planes flew at them backwards, sucked bullets and shell fragments from some of the planes and crewmen. They did the same for the wrecked American bombers on the ground, and those planes flew up backwards to join the formation. The formation flew backwards over a German city that was in flames. The bombers opened their bay doors, exerted a miraculous magnetism which shrunk the fires, gathered them into cylindrical steel containers, and lifted the containers into the bellies of the planes. The containers were stored neatly in the racks. The Germans below had miraculous devices of their own, which were long steel tubes. They used them to suck more fragments from the crewmen and planes. But there were still a few wounded Americans, though, and some of the bombers were in bad repair. Over France, though, German fighters came up again, made everything and everybody as good as new. I'm going to continue because the end of this passage is really powerful. But you can see what he's doing here if you're listening closely. He's, like I said, the fighting in reverse. Very interesting concept. When the bombers got back to their base, the steel cylinders were taken from the racks, shipped back to the United States of America, where factories were operating day and night, dismantling the cylinders, separating the dangerous contents into minerals. Touchingly, it was mainly women who did this work. The minerals were then shipped to specialists in remote areas. It was their business to put them into the ground, to hide them cleverly so they would never hurt anybody ever again. The American flyers turned in their uniforms, became high school kids, and Hitler turned into a baby. Billy Pilgrim supposed. That wasn't in the movie. Billy was extrapolating. Everybody turned into a baby, and all humanity, without exception, conspired biologically to produce two perfect people named Adam and Eve, he supposed. And so we get this. It's like making me a little bit emotional just reading that, the end there, where it says they would never hurt anybody ever again. It's such a sobering picture of war and what it does to people. And as he explores that kind of concept of like war in reverse, where we just see all of the pain and hurt and violence and hatred just kind of dissipate and be removed from the situation, it all ends up back in the place where Vonnegut explores Christian themes throughout a lot of his stories. Um, Adam and Eve, two perfect people, Adam and Eve. And so I think Vonnegut really, I don't know where I'm exactly going with that, but I just wanted to read that section because I don't think it spoils anything. I don't think anything that I've said actually really spoils this book. It's not really a book you read for the plot, so to speak. It's a book you read for the experience of just sitting with Kurt by the fire as he tells you this fantastical and very, very awful journey of his time in World War II. And it's the alternate title for this book, not really alternate, but kind of like the subtitle for this book is The Children's Crusade, A Duty Dance with Death. Near the beginning, he is talking to one of his, I think it's Kurt, trying to figure out how to write this story. And he is talking to one of his war buddies' wives who's very upset as they're talking at the kitchen table. And she just kind of says, like, they're just kids. And it's really, really powerful when you put it like that, when it's a bunch of kids who are fighting this war. And I think Kurt at the time, I need to go look at what age he was, but he was probably just a kid, more or less. And so I know some people may do analysis on this book and talk about the Tralfamadorians and Kurt's experience or Billy Pilgrim's experience being transported around time and what that means and that kind of thing. But I think you should just read it for yourself and experience it for yourself, because it's a book that you'll put down, and if you really try to understand it and try to see Kurt's vision for it, I think it'll really move you. Because I put this book down and I it was one of those moments where you go, I won't ever get to experience that for the first time again. That was my first thought because of how special I felt that moment was reading this book. And you just, if you read a lot of books and you seek out really good books, sometimes you hit those ones where you just try to savor it in the moment, because as soon as it's passed, you're like, wow, that was a book that it's going to be hard to find a book like that again. So from a reader, from the reading experience of somebody who loves science fiction and who has always had a kind of an interest and fascination in World War II and what happened, not being alive and also not having any family members participate in in the war efforts from the American side, it's it's one of those things where I think this is the perfect encapsulation of a writer that had a humanity and depth to him, a story that was inventive and also really, really uh, just soul crushing in a lot of ways, but also a story that just envelops you in in anti-war and why it's bad. It's as simple as that sounds, as simple as that's put by me. It's kind of lame to say it like that, a little lazy to say it like that, but you know what I mean. It's Kurt was trying to just tell everybody, like, war sucks. We shouldn't do it. Stop fighting each other, you know. And I think I mentioned this in one of my recent videos talking about what video was that? I talked about the, you know, the timeliness of these themes where we're seeing wars have been kind of going on for all of humanity, but we're seeing it right now in front of our eyes in the world, and it's really a sad thing. And I think reading books like this remind you that these wars are being fought by people. The orchestrating, larger forces, maybe not as much, but there are people that are involved in these conflicts, and these stories need to be told and are very powerful. And so I don't want to keep rambling, but I just want to impress upon anybody who chose to watch this that this is a special book by a special writer who I think you should give a try if you haven't. Um, Find a copy of this, please, and at least give it a shot. I don't think you will be disappointed. Um, I feel strange grading it, but it's a perfect book. I wouldn't change anything about it. Partially because of the context, but also because Vonnegut's just such a good writer. He really, like I said, he meets me in a place where, as a reader, he is one of my favorite writers, and I've only read 2 books by him. I am so floored that I have a lot more to read from him, because he's just wonderful. And so, with that, um, cheers to a nice cup of coffee, to a good book, to the birds somewhere up in the trees. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of you guys, and I hope you read this book. It's been Slaughterhouse-Five. Thanks for watching.